Okay, so first things first, quick apology. I accidentally deleted all my Elden Ring footage that I'd specifically saved for this piece. So instead you're going to get a lot of stock footage in the background while I talk at you, which is exactly what you were looking for. Anyway, TLDR, Elden Ring is a departure from the combat-based action of Bloodborne and Sekiro to a more stat and build-based formula which seems to reward specific builds rather than skill. Elden Ring is as much of a stats and build-focused RPG as much as Sekiro and Bloodborne were pure skill-based Souls-likes. Now, a lot of people won't like that take, and we could break down these psychological issues why a bunch of players who may have been demanding easy mode previously suddenly fell in love with Elden Ring when their broken build one-shotted everything. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the intricacies of why I feel Elden Ring is FromSoft's third best game of all time, and really should not even be in the contender for greatest game of all time. If you all want to call me a noob in the comments, feel free, but also don't forget to subscribe while you do that. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. By now, you would have all have seen and read all the praise that has been heaped upon Elden Ring over the last, 8 months. But in my opinion, the game really has some key issues that I don't think really a lot of mainstream reviewers touched upon. In my opinion, how could they? A lot of these reviews have deadlines and are pushed to be the first review out to help with the YouTube algorithm. Talking of which, don't forget to subscribe. But there's no way somebody could have played Elden Ring in its entirety within the short review windows given. Never mind actually getting to the build issues that I'm going to talk about. To be clear, Elden Ring is a really good game, but under the hood there are glaring issues regarding overall balance, flow and combat structure the game has, as well as gameplay design flaws that are a result of shifting the Souls formula to a huge open world. In spectacle, Elden Ring is quite frankly unsurpassed, but as a rounded product it sits outside of FromSoft's top 2 quite comfortably in my opinion, and they are of course Bloodborne and Sekiro. Easily my 1-2, and both of them fall into my top 10 games of all time. Let's focus on specific areas and then get into the nitty gritty of all of this. Now, I don't want to repeat too many of the positives that have been heaped on the game, which is going to make this kind of opinion piece sound like a bit of a negative hammer bashing of the game, but I'm not going to bore you with what you already know. Elden Ring is an absolute marvel. The spectacle is unsurpassed. It has incredible art direction, really good boss designs in terms of artistic style, apart from the many bosses that are copy and pasted, a superb ambient soundtrack which then kind of morphs into this massive orchestral piece that's absolutely stunning and often kicks in at the best of times. As I stated previously, as a spectacle, it's god tier stuff. It's easy to argue it just may be one of the most grandiose game worlds of all time, and it's a world you can really get lost in. So moving on to the story, and I'm not a fan of this type of storytelling. It's an absolute jigsaw puzzle behind a fridge under the X that marks the space camel that is this story. That's right, that made no sense, and neither does the story in this game. If I'd said what I just said in Elden Ring, people would tell you it's fantastic writing. So I know FromSoft games are not known for their clear narrative. They have come some way from telling you the story via the blurb on a finger you found in a toilet somewhere, but the storytelling has always been a bit ethereal. A bit like a whisper in the wind, but a wind blowing in one linear direction. The story here just doesn't have a basic premise like previous games. In Sekiro, you promise to defend a young lord. In Demon Souls, demons are consuming the souls of humans as you try to fight. In Dark Souls, you fight to stop humanity losing its sanity. In Bloodborne, you're being hunted and you become the hunter to escape. In Elden Ring, you just butcher everything in sight after being banished and becoming a tarnished. But for what reason? Well, really, there isn't one. There's no real reason for what you're doing. You're just doing it, for a throne. Thrones are good, I guess. Now, the issue with Elden Ring is that due to the open world nature, that wind is blowing all over the place, like that plastic bag in American Beauty.
You want to see the most beautiful thing I've ever filmed?
With the open-ended structure, the fabric of the story narrative just falls apart. I find it really hard to believe, now and impossible, that you can track any of these side quests and stories without some kind of help from the Elden Ring wiki, or a notepad, or a personal typist typing everything up and letting you know what's going on. By the time you're reaching the end game, you have, due to no distinct decision of your own, ended up killing, not killing certain people, and the story has just gone all over the shop. You will miss NPCs, shops, characters on your first run through, and I'll be damned if you have to go through this game again. It's blooming fucking huge. Just link me the YouTube video so I can hear how the certain NPC stories ends, please. And let's be honest, we did that, didn't we? Yes, Elden Ring has much better lore than previous games, and that is where the juicy stuff is, but it is not in the storytelling. Great lore does not automatically equal a great story. Elden Ring's story is a mess. There's not really any rhyme or reason to your quest. You want to become an Elden Lord for what now? The NPC storylines ask you to make choices, and then it's pot luck whether you come across the second or third branching path of these choices. Now look, the cutscenes are epic and easily the best FromSoft have served up, and the scale of the lore and the cutscenes, bosses and game world, it is incredible, but it does not hide from the messy narrative. Really, your imagination does all the hard work while in the game. Somebody tells you about a prophet that rode a recycling bin into the scarlet rot infested pit of your local fish and chip shop. What do you mean that doesn't make sense? It would make sense in Elden Ring. Alright, so onto the game flow. Where to even begin? This is one of my massive gripes with the game. As I began writing this, FromSoft released patch 1.07, and it basically kind of confirms what I've been saying about the game flow for so long. The game has no balance. I mean, it's hard to even call it balance in Elden Ring. And FromSoft basically agreed that it was a complete mess and decided to separate PvP and PvE, which just kind of confirms kind of how broken many of the facets of the build crafting in Elden Ring are. At their best, FromSoft games provide a challenge that players' skill would overcome. The challenge felt fair, it felt conquerable. You felt yourself improving on every parry. You began to see the parry windows, the combo windows, versus classic bosses like, I don't know, the Blood-Starved Beast in Bloodborne or whoever else. In Elden Ring, honestly, these fights, a lot of them are such bullshit that even the greatest Elden Ring players at the moment, they're using every trick in the book they can to beat the toughest bosses in the game. The fights are almost all doable eventually by spamming very overpowered spells or ranged attacks, or you can use specific melee status effect builds to give yourself a big advantage. Now, at the beginning of Elden Ring's release, these builds were rife, and honestly, I have to ask the question, considering how many journalists were complaining about the difficulty of Bloodborne and Sekiro and so many were asking for easy mode, how many of those players abused these builds to then finish Elden Ring, felt great about themselves and heaped praise on it? I hope that doesn't sound elitist. Again, with the open world nature of the game, if you choose to explore the world and kill bosses, the chances are you are coming into the main dungeons of the game severely over leveled. So the difficulty curve is just all over the place. I found almost every boss, bar Melania, more on her later, easy. Not because I'm good at Elden Ring, because my build or spells just allowed me to circumnavigate a lot of the bullshit boss mechanics. Now here's how I would generally describe a Bloodborne or Sekiro difficulty curve. And here is how I would say the Elden Ring difficulty curve is. Now what's that I hear you say? What was that? Sorry? That's my fault? I should play a different way? Why the hell would anybody play a different way when these bosses are designed so badly? We're not on some journey like Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai to fight honorably until death do us part. We have got shit to do in our lives, rather than die to a ridiculous spiral of death attack which has a 0.0001 millisecond reaction time on a backdash. Fuck that. Now why are the bosses designed like this? There's got to be a reason. FromSoft are excellent craftsmen when it comes to game design. Oh yeah, because they put in this thing called Spirit Ashes, the worst addition to Elden Ring or any FromSoft game. I hope this is never brought back. I hope it never rears its head again. I hope a Spirit Ash was basically used to entice more people into the Souls-like formula, and then they're just going to just pull it away like somebody pulls the rug from under your feet. Issue with Spirit Ashes is twofold. Firstly, it takes away from the often solitary journey that is a FromSoft game, and there's something special about that. A FromSoft experience is often one about you versus the odds. Spirit Ashes for me took a bit of shine off the boss fights. I mean, look, I'm not ashamed to admit, you summon a Spirit Ash, you wait for the boss to attack him, and you just go on the back of him and smack him in the back of the head. So he's probably saying, well, don't use Spirit Ashes. But why, when the boss is clearly designed for Spirit Ashes? I mean, some bosses spawn two bosses that have a camera that's spazzing out all over the place, and you're just like, what the fuck is going on here? Now, I'm not saying all the boss fights are bad. Look, there's some incredible boss fights in Elden Ring. You'd be a fool to say anything else. There's some very good highs, especially early on. But to call the boss fights generally good or bad, we will need to define what is a good or bad boss fight. Well, for me, it's simply this. A boss fight should allow the player to learn and understand movesets and patterns to then allow them to use their own movesets and skill to inflict damage and defeat the boss. This is a risk-reward system in boss fights where taking a risk on an opening should lead to a reward of high damage. No boss fight should be designed in a way that it makes a certain playstyle completely obsolete, and it shouldn't be designed in a way that has such few windows of opportunity that the player is forced into playing a super safe or passive boring playstyle. Attacks should have some kind of telegraph or tell, and those telegraphs and tells should be learnable the more you play the game. Combos from the boss should be consistent to allow learning. The camera should not be a hindrance and something that needs constant management. So yeah, for me, a lot of the boss fights just don't tick enough of those boxes. Some tick some boxes and don't tick others, some tick other boxes and don't tick some other boxes. Tie this in with the open world and often you go into fights either severely overcooked or underleveled, and it's very hard to figure out whether or not you should even be in an area at a specific time, meaning most fights are either too easy or clearly way outside your level. Until the last few bosses, but won't even bother with that. And I'm not going to go into individual fights. There is enough content out there about bad boss fights in Elden Ring. Often it's just FromSoft turning the dial to pain in the ass and just asking you to play a style that's super safe to even give you a chance to kill the boss. Often this involves summoning your spirit ash, waiting for it to aggro the boss and taking pot shots at the boss. The boss fights just don't feel rewarding to me. It's often a more passive role that goes against every great memory I have from FromSoft games. Even legendary players like Let Me Solo Her use specific builds that are very strong and give every advantage possible. Maybe I'm looking at it with rose-tinted glasses, but I felt like I never had to do this in Bloodborne and Sekiro. You just played with what you were given and got better, or got good. The boss damage, speed and mechanics have clearly been cranked up to balance out spirit ashes, and it really damages the very soul, see what I did there, of the game. A little bit more on the combat, and for me it's just a step back from the engaging combat flow of Sekiro and Bloodborne. I absolutely adored their combat. It expanded the player's opportunity for creative movement against fast-paced enemies, and it threw in counters, weapon switching, combos, critical hits, iframe palm, all that you'd want that allowed for incredible combat even versus standard enemies. Elden Ring, on the other hand, has enemies that are as fast as enemies in those mentioned games, but with Dark Souls movement. It just doesn't fit together right. It's good, but it's not Bloodborne or Sekiro good. The truth is, it became clear to me that Elden Ring is a game more about build crafting than individual combat based skill. Onto replayability, and honestly, I understand you've got your hardcore players out there, but for me I think you're having a laugh if you think I'm going to play through Elden Ring again. I played through Sekiro and Bloodborne both on NG Plus and absolutely loved it. There's no way in hell I would play this game again, and that's often because some bosses are just end up being a joke. You don't know where the challenge is going to lie when you get to a boss. The open world allows for a scale and scope that is stunning, but from a gameplay point of view, it just means the gameplay curve is all over the shop. Exploring the world actually ends up having a negative effect on boss fights due to the aforementioned leveling, and that's a huge bummer for me. Bosses are very often repeated but seem genetically modified to be 10 times harder than the last copy-paste boss you faced. The randomness of the difficulty is just plain odd, and again, it's down to the freeform open world design. The result of this, to be honest, is that players feel the needle nudge from brutal difficulty but learning and improving to ridiculous difficulty. What the fuck is my quickest way out of this? These are key differences, and I think they've just got it a touch wrong. FromSoft clearly dialed it up to a point that it broke the very balance of combat, and they did this to try balance the many extra tools given to the player, but it really begins to break what constitutes a great Souls experience. Now, I've never heard anybody say previous Souls games like Bloodborne or Sekiro were easy. Nobody has said that. So why on earth was Elden Ring cranked up to such a level that it almost forces player choice? Games like Sekiro and Bloodborne didn't have a system that allowed for abuse, or more to the point, didn't have a system that made players veer towards the path of least resistance. At least that wasn't my experience. The path of least resistance in those games was learning and skill. Path of least resistance in Elden Ring is using builds that lower the bullshitometer to bring it to somewhat of a fair fight. There are over 90 spirit ashes and 300 weapons in Elden Ring, yet I'd say 75 to 85% of the players would have used the same 2 or 3 setups, and there is a reason for that. I was somebody that was so excited for Elden Ring, and yeah, all these things have been things I wanted to talk about for a while, and that they just kind of left me feeling a bit empty, to be honest. The truth is, it became clear to me that Elden Ring became more about build crafting than skill. As I said previously, it really does feel like a more of a stats and build focused RPG rather than what Sekiro and Bloodborne were, which were pure skill based action Souls like. But to be honest, you can't have it all your own way, and for all the stat min maxes out there, I'm glad that you got your game. It's just that people like myself who really enjoy the more engaging action based combat from those games, maybe we just feel a little bit left out. Maybe the next one will manage to successfully mix Sekiro, Bloodborne and Elden Ring together and make something absolutely incredible. The truth for me about Elden Ring is this: it's a jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring spectacle that cracks under the sheer pressure and weight of the huge, vast open world. Exploring leads to either being over-leveled or under-leveled, or missing chunks of side quests. Balance is awful, leading to a skewered player weapon use, broken PvP, and uninteresting fights, which look good but don't play well. Often vision or information is obscure to add a layer of difficulty to fights that don't adhere FromSoft's usual excellent structure. Gone are Sekiro's clear signals and telegraphs and in-out attacks that give you zero notice and a 10-hit combo. Gone are the sharp dodge windows of Bloodborne and in-out attacks that have an AoE the side of 10 double-decker buses. Scaling in the game pushes players further down stat allocation rather than player skill. Some fights are rendered completely different if you happen upon certain items hidden away in a corner of the world. Overall, I wanted to love Elden Ring, but was left completely bemused by its combat design and leveling process. Yes, it's an incredible looking game. Yes, it feels incredible to be in the world with unmatched scale and grandeur, but in all honesty, it's pretty messy down in the combat trenches. That's all from me. Feel free to call me a noob in the comments and tell me I'm trash. Stay safe and take care.